Bobbye Thompson has the most amazing backyard. I will show you if you stay around. Please join us, meet the artist, speaking with Bobbye Thompson as we get to know this amazing artist. Okay, her and I are like kindred spirits. She is such a lovely lady. So I hope you enjoy this interview. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe.
The thing is, when I first started painting several years ago, when I retired, and in watercolor, I always did still life. I never did anything outside the studio, never did plein air painting. And so when I moved here, I joined a plein air group, and that was my first experience painting out. Obviously, now you're painting the landscape. So it was a tremendous learning experience in what to eliminate. You're looking at this backyard.
That's interesting. That's what Ken said too. It was about what's not in.
Yes, and you have no idea, especially brand new, and you're with a lot of people who are painting, and some are professional. Some have been doing this for years, and you're going, oh my God. But it's what to eliminate that really makes the piece come alive. And so it's always a learning process. So it's only been maybe the last 4 or 5 years that I've done landscapes. Actually, about the last 3 years, because I was doing still life setups.
Right before.
And so that's been my journey, and it will continue forever because it's a learning process.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever fully learn all of these techniques, and each time you take a workshop from someone,
there's something new.
They're introducing you to some new way of doing it.
And it's the beautiful thing about education too, right? About continuing stuff, because people come up with new stuff all the time.
Always.
Right? And you're like, oh, well, I would have never thought of that, but thank God somebody did, because now I have a new tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a pretty great experience. So that's on my list, is to do some plein air painting, because I haven't ever done that.
Well, it's an experience, and
but now I feel like I have a little heads up.
Yeah,
right?
well,
it's like what not to put in the picture is like where my mind needs to be.
Well, you have to focus on something in the big picture. You have to focus on something that you feel is the focal point. And it doesn't mean you always have to have a focal point. I just don't agree that that's what you have to have.
Right.
But you've got to have something to look at that doesn't get you distracted in getting into the painting. So, and I was a teacher, and I'm still in touch with some of my kids from 50 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so I know that you need encouragement. And the people in this plein air group, I'm in 2 plein air groups now, but these people are very encouraging, very willing to share, and they'll critique something for you without tearing your head off or ripping your piece apart. So we host a critique group every other week, and people are very kind and they're very helpful. Right.
And that really is what a critique should be.
Absolutely.
Right, is not how crappy your piece is, right? But
or that color is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
But how can you improve?
Exactly.
What can you change? Like maybe the hue of that color needs to be warmer or cooler or not as saturated or whatever. But
or the value.
Always things to just think about.
Right.
Because you don't have to change anything about.
Right. And that's nice about critique people, or this group that I belong to. You take in what they say. It doesn't mean you have to do that.
No.
But sometimes the things that they suggest are actually exactly what you needed to hear, but you're not aware of it until you hear it. And so these little comments, well, what about this, and why did you do that? it's very helpful. So whether you do it or not in the end is
Right.
one thing, but often you take those to heart and make those
Correct.
changes.
And you implement them
That's
on
right.
the next round,
That's
right?
right.
You bear that in mind. And I find that's terribly powerful for artists, right? Is just to have these little bits of information in the back of our mind so that when we sit down to do something,
You pull it out.
you pull it out. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. Here's this thing.
That's right. And it could be some little tiny thing that at the time may not even have any impact. And yet, when you approach a piece and then you get to the point where that little piece of information comes to the forefront, you think, wow, now I get that. You know, it doesn't
Right.
mean
Oh,
you.
it makes sense.
Yeah, now I get it. Now I get it. Right.
Yeah, that's it reminds me. So, what did you teach?
Upper elementary, junior high,
Okay.
all levels of from art to science and math. But I used art as a motivator to teach math. We did art projects when we had something in mind, a new concept that we needed to
Oh.
learn. So, and I taught in Santa Barbara for several years. And I ended up getting a group of students that were seriously deficient in math skills. And my background's basically working with gifted and talented children.
Okay.
So now I've got this group of kids who are deficient in their math skills. And so I was struggling, but the way I figured that the best way to do this was to elevate their ego. And how do you do that? Well, I sent them down to pair up one-on-one with second graders. So my sixth graders were teaching second graders
That's brilliant.
concept that they had really missed when they were in second grade. And so it was like, look at me, I'm teaching and
Right.
and
so I'm
and
smarter
what
than I
happened up
thought.
here was a lot more important than learning the math skill. But then that came as a secondary issue.
Probably easier.
And it was
right?
easier.
Well, because there's that confidence, right? Now they
Absolutely.
have confidence, and now they know that they can, and there's value in knowing that you know.
That's right.
So when you can share something that you know, there's value in that as how you see yourself.
It's magical.
Yeah.
It's magical. And when these sixth graders were working with these second graders and teaching them something, it was like, wow, now I know how to do this because I had to teach the skill to somebody else.
Yeah. Well,
So
they always say that you never learn so much as when you teach.
True.
Right?
True. Absolutely.
I think that's very true.
Absolutely.
How did you come up with creative, artistic projects in order to teach math? Because I love that.
Now let's talk about my sixth graders teaching second graders. Okay, it had to be something, they had to get approval from me and they had to write a lesson plan. I mean, that was a requirement. And so, but it could have been anything. It could have been a game. It could have been how many times you bounce the basketball or how many steps you have to take to get from here to there. Or it was the very basic concepts, very basic. Or paper pencil activities that they would approve with me and then go down and share with these second graders. These kids didn't have the success in math that some kids did. And so I decided to teach them how to score their bowling cards. So we went bowling once a week. We had parents help take these kids in cars. But remember, these were days when you could go off campus and you could do that and not get arrested or whatever. And so we went bowling. We did things in the classroom. I did things in the classroom with them. As far as art concerned, do you know the little projects where you take a board and you paint it dark black and you poke holes in it and bring stitchery pieces through it? Well, measuring those things when you have to do a pure circle or a triangle or a rectangle or some shape, then it has to be measured and it has to be equal, 2 to 3 or 4 to 5 or whatever you, the instructor, says it has to be. So that was a project that this one comes to mind. I wrote a book. It was published by the Learning Works in Santa Barbara years ago, just a teacher's book, paperback, called Art Aardvark. And so some of these things that I did with my kids are in this in this book,
Yeah,
and then
it's
that was shared
great.
with other teachers. But I, because I didn't have the skill to reach down as low as these kids needed to be, I had to figure out ways that they could do things that were worthy of where they were and yet bring their skills up while
Right.
teaching something to
But
somebody else.
I think that the challenge that you seem to have been able to kind of nail is the creative in the math. So with math, you're very linear thinking,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And the creative is very flowy, right?
yes,
Creative thinking kind of flows. And the difference is that when you're in the flow, the lines make more sense.
yes.
And when you're in the lines, the flow has better flow.
That's right.
And I didn't learn that about even about myself until I was well into my like late 20s, when I was like, oh, I get it.
Mm.
When I am learning, when my left brain is super active and I'm learning, actually in the process of learning, taking a class or whatever it is, then my creative brain gets ignited. It gets ideas. It gets thoughts,
Absolutely.
you know. And so tying them both together to teach math
Well, and
as a win.
about that time, you know how in school they would have these in-services and the kids got to go home early and the teacher stayed and have this in-service with someone who came in and usually they didn't want to be there anyway. But
Right.
at one point, Betty Edwards, our teacher at Long Beach State, came. She did the book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. You may be familiar with that book. And she came and did a presentation to an auditorium of about 400 teachers. She absolutely hooked me. Absolutely hooked me. It's like looking upside down. It gives me cold chills. Looking upside down at something and drawing the space around the object. Instead of drawing the object, you draw the space around it. And later, when I was the art teacher at Bonita School outside of Guadalupe in Santa Barbara County for the county schools of Santa Barbara. And I would go once a week to this school, and it was a pod school where there were K1, 2s, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And with my upper kids, I would teach them drawing. And, oh, I can't do this, I can't, oh, I've never been good, I can't. Yes, you can. Sure you can. You just have to think you can.
Yeah.
So we made Chinese rice paper kites that actually flew, and they were incredible. And it was string that they had to take off a spool of thread and put it on a can in order to fly these kites, because the kites were only like
Right.
18 inches, made out of rice paper. Longer tail, better flight, that kind of thing. But they had to figure these things out.
Right.
But also in teaching them to draw, I would put slides up in the classroom and a projector, and the slide would be upside down and slightly out of focus, and the kids would go, well,
What do
what's
you want us to
that?
do with that? Yeah.
Well, what's that? And you know how 8th graders might be. Sorry. And so I said, well, just concentrate. Think, what do you think it is? It's just a shape. Draw what you see. And so as they were going through this process of learning to see something, then I'd start sharpening the camera a bit, so the focus came in. Oh my God, it's a deer. Or, oh, look at that, it's a whatever.
Right.
So then they begin to look at something in a different way, as I had done with her materials. And so I incorporated her things whenever I had a chance to teach at any time. And then I left teaching after about 10 years. I went back to get my degree to become a principal in the classroom. And I was in Santa Barbara, UCSB, but I went to work that summer for the Big Blue Marble, which is a children's television production. It was supposed to be a summer job, and it ended up to be 4 years. And I never went back into the classroom.
Wow.
I taught all my life. I had a learning center later up in Sacramento, but I did not go back in the public setting in the classroom. And but I always remember, Betty Edwards techniques and how you have to look at something differently or draw something upside down.
Yeah.
And
I
you
mean,
don't
just
even know
the-
what you're looking at. Just draw it
Right.
upside down and then turn it over and say, oh my God, look at that.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to have to check that
Betty
out.
Edwards.
Yeah, I have to check that out because I
Yep.
think I think that there's just some benefits that can be applied to life as well,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Because
Absolutely.
we can get so stuck on thinking things are one way that it's hard for us to see it from a different
Perspective. That's right.
Yeah. And so that if
It's
we,
like
we
learning.
can unfocus a little,
Yeah,
right?
well,
Just
and it's like
unfocus a
learning
little.
someone else's perspective or their point of view. If you're closed off on, no, that can't possibly work, or that won't work, or that isn't right, or my thinking is not like yours, and so you're not correct, you're wrong. And so once you get over the hump and you begin to say, well, that's possible. That's really, I never thought of that. And it's the same
Or
thing
it
in,
fit that way.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I love that though. You do have to be open to, you have to be open to learning, right? And I feel like if you're open to learning, then you can, then I don't think you have those conflicts.
Yes.
Right? I don't think you have the same conflicts.
I agree.
With other people when you are open to learning, because there's that mindset that's always
well, there's always a new
possible,
way to do something.
right?
It's like, I had a history professor. I went to Cal State Northridge, and I had to commute from Ventura
Ew.
for 2 years after work,
Oh.
2 nights a week.
Yeah.
It was awful, but I was young and eager, and so it
Makes
was
a huge
okay.
difference.
But I had an instructor who said, and you know the phrase, "There's nothing new under the sun." Well, and that's true. We just
extent.
present it differently.
Sure.
It's the same thing, but we present it differently. That's why there's so many artists. There's so many techniques, because we all learn some basic stuff, but then you approach it in a different way. And so your approach might be new, or it might be new to somebody, or it's certainly new to you.
Correct. Yeah. But that you wouldn't. You have to be open. You have to be willing to even see it, or try something you've never tried before. Just get outside your box, right?
Outside your comfort zone. Yeah.
Stretch
If
yourself.
if you allow yourself to struggle, I think the learning process is easier.
Well, then when you get it, right? When you've learned
Then
it,
it's really there.
it's really there, and you really feel like you can celebrate.
That's right.
Like then there's a real celebration too. If it comes easy, if things come easy, it doesn't feel as celebratory, right? But if you had to struggle a little bit, like if you've ever had to change a flat tire on a car, right? It is not easy, but when you do it and you complete it and you drive away, you're like,
Yeah, I know,
right?
I know. We were, for years, we were scuba divers outside of Wainimi, and I took my class half at a time out on a boat, and then my husband and I dove, brought up specimens and put them back and all. But in the beginning, one of the reasons that I began scuba diving was that one of the other teachers had done this, had passed his certification, now he's certified. And we were talking in the staff lounge about this, and he made the mistake of saying, "But I don't think you could pass the tests." Not the tests, this test, but the physical part of it. And it just hit me like, are you kidding?
Right.
Are you kidding me? I can do that. Well, and then fast forward, we did a lot of photography. My husband was a spear fisherman, not my current husband, my first husband, who's no longer with us. But he did some spear fishing, but mostly we were into photography.
Okay.
And he had worked for the Navy and had built his own scuba tanks. They were twin tanks. They were fully certified, and on one of our little dive adventures with our cameras, and we're going along, and he's pointing back like this, and I looked, and his tanks had slipped out of the bolt carrier thing. And so I had to come around and pull up with one hand and try to screw this thing down. Well, that was one thing. In the meantime, this 1,500-pound seal is diving on us like this. He never touched us. But his hackles were up and his teeth were bared. And we had ended up working our way down to about 90 feet, which is deeper than I ever intended to go. But it turned out it was rookery season.
Oh.
So he thought we were invading his territory.
Right.
And so the process of trying to get that tank clamped back on, we had to go over and stay down longer than we intended in order to work back up the rope. But things like that you don't forget. And so and that's just part of living. As you said, that's part of life. It has nothing to do with art or anything, but it's part of a lesson that you learn that will stay with you forever. I did an outward bound for 3 days when I was in Santa Barbara. I was in my very early 40s. I'd never backpacked in my life. I went out with a group of 32 people. It was through the university, through Jude Lee, who was the instructor. And so she took us all to a base camp outside of Fresno in the Eastern Sierras, and we then hiked 6 miles in, set up base camp, and then the following day, each of us individually were taken out to a spot, and we were left there alone by ourselves at night for 3 nights. And I'd camped a lot when I was a kid, but what an experience. And you wouldn't think that something like that would be a lifelong thing, but I have drawn on that the rest of my life, over and over again. The first night, when I put my sleeping bag down on its pad, I put it on a lot of pine needles on a slope, and I ended up at the bottom of the hill the next morning.
Pine needles are slippery.
And they are, and you turn, and so you're working your way down. And so the next day I figured out, well, I need to do something being present and being aware of your surroundings. But I'm telling you, the one experience, a little dicey, I decided to go outside of my realm of where I was supposed to stay. And so I walked over to this outcropping of granite, was going to watch the sunset. And it was glorious, it was beautiful, absolutely incredible. But then I had to walk back in the absolute pure black dark. I'm talking really dark. And so, you learn things. Well, I should have taken my little flashlight. Well, so now I don't do that anymore.
Right. That's the
it's
best thing.
such
It's like, okay, well, I've learned that now.
Yeah.
And now I don't make that mistake anymore.
Yeah. But it was an experience, and all these little tiny things in your life become a learning tool for later, for something, for whatever.
Yeah, it's always a preparation for something to come. Whatever lesson
Absolutely.
you're learning today is always in preparation for something to come.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I had a friend once tell me, he said, "You're the most curious person I have ever met," and I thought he meant weird.
Oh.
And I was really offended, and I'm going, well, what? And he said, no, you want to know about everything. And so then I, kind of settled down. But
that's funny. My dear friend Heather says that about me all the time.
Most curious?
I am super curious.
Yeah.
And so I always want to dig deeper. So it's always about the why. Well, what? Now what? Now what? Now what? Now what?
You must
now
have
what?
driven your parents crazy. How come
I
and
think
why?
I drove my parents crazy on lots of different levels.
Yeah.
And I don't know about that. Like, I don't know if I was always curious as a young person, but as I've gotten older, I think that I've discovered there's so much to learn.
Yeah.
And there's so much more than what is surface.
Yes.
And so just like when you're talking about like staring at the grass in the circle, and I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because there's something there.
Yeah.
There is something there.
Yeah.
If you really look. And
That's
so
right.
that's what that's where the curiosity
That's
comes in,
right.
is like, I just want to know, I just want to see, I just want to experience, and I need to have a deeper understanding, which means that I know a lot of things about a lot of stuff that does not pertain to my life at all.
And I was just going to say that it has nothing
Nope.
to do with anything.
Only because I was curious in the moment.
Yep.
And so I did a little deep dive and learned enough that I sound like I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But, and the interesting thing is, every time that happens, somebody shows up that needs that information.
Yes.
And so I'm like,
Yeah.
check this out.
Yeah.
I literally just learned this yesterday,
Yeah.
but I clearly learned it for you. So here's the information I have, right? This is what I know. And I love that, though. It is annoying to other people, though.
Well, it can be.
Yeah.
It can be. It can be an affront, and it can be intimidating. And because of my height as a 6-footer, that's intimidating enough.
Too, right?
And so then you come across as not only your height is an issue, but now you've got this information that you're just really eager to share. And they're going, whoa,
Right, now you're a little
wait a
aggressive.
minute. Yeah.
Yeah, that. Yeah, I love the curiosity, so I'm glad to. I'm glad to know that about you.
Well, it's gotten me through some really sticky situations when you have to learn something really quickly.
Right.
And I think number one is you have to observe what the issue is. You have to be smart enough to look around instead of just being in this frame where it's right here, right in front of me. This is all I see right here. But you have to open up.
Right. Yeah, you have to get more information.
That's right. And to be able to give it to somebody who wants to accept it.
Right.
You know, you have to be very careful about shoving stuff down people's throats.
true.
They resent that. I resent that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And this is something that I've maybe more recently learned, and that is, so as a hairdresser, I talk a lot, and my clients trust me, and they've been with me a long time, and so I can have pretty much any conversation with them, and I can tell them anything. But in other circumstances, I don't often ask permission to give feedback, or to share, or to say, hey, I have some information that might be helpful to you. Would you be interested in hearing it?
Well, but you know what? That takes time and energy, and then you lose your eagerness. You lose the
Right.
enthusiasm,
I know,
and
in
by
the
that time,
moment
you don't
of-
want to tell them anyway.
Yeah, like,
Just
forget it.
Never mind.
Forget it. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting that I'm like, that's, because I don't need that. Because I don't need that to, like, if you have something for me, you should just tell me.
Yes.
Like, you do not need to ask my permission. If you have something that I need, you should tell me. I do not have to take it.
Yeah. It's like our critique.
Yeah.
You listen, and especially you have to be willing to listen, but you don't have to do that.
Correct.
You don't have to participate in whatever that idea is, but you can listen. You can give them that courtesy, that respect, but then do it your own way anyway.
Yeah.
So
Well, and then as the person offering or teaching, you have to be willing to let it go,
yes.
right? So as if you're critiquing somebody, you have to go, here are my thoughts, blah 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 blah, and then you walk away and you never think about that again,
Yep.
right? Because I've shared with you, you either take it and do something with it or you don't, but I'm not bound to it. I'm not connected to
But
it.
there is another part to that too, and that is, did that person take your advice and do something with it? And then it's always fun to see what they did,
Yeah.
because they're going to take what you said, but then they're going to create something out of their own mind, but it came from your
Right,
idea.
it's still inspired
That's
by.
right. So that inspiration, it's always fun to see what they did with it.
Yeah, agreed. I think a lot of times I don't. No, I mean, my clients are pretty good about saying, hey, I gave some advice to my mom
Yeah.
once, and I let it go, right? I said this, you should try this, I think it would be helpful to you, and I felt like she didn't even hear me. And then a week later, she was like, hey, I tried that thing, and this is what happened.
Yeah.
that was brilliant. I
Yeah,
was like, oh,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
But she could have not ever told me.
Yes,
You know, she could have not shared that with me. And I'm glad that she did. And I'm glad it worked.
yes. Well, sure, because it's a boost to your own self. It's like, gee, somebody listened and they actually did what I said and it worked out for them.
Right.
Gee, that makes me feel great.
Yeah, and because then I feel helpful,
Yes.
useful. And,
Yes.
Yeah.
Participatory. You're participating in these issues with other people, and they're actually listening. And once in a while, that in itself is the reward. You know?
Agreed. So I think that it's super funny that you started this interview by saying, I am not an artist and or only for the last 5 years. However, throughout the whole interview has been art. So you have been an artist your whole life, it sounds like.
Well, I suppose that's true. I've loved art forever. I still have some drawings that I did when I was in 6th grade. And I've only taken one formal art class that was required in high school, Art 101. Everybody fell in love with the art teacher, Pat Patterson. Everybody wanted to take her class. This is at Bakersfield High School. And so that was my only formal training, other than these workshops that I've done. And these people that do these workshops are so willing to share. I mean, it's a phenomenon that I never quite get over. They're not like, well, I'm not going to tell you, this is what I'm not going to share that with you. But it's like everybody in the art field wants everybody else in the art field to succeed.
To succeed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're willing. And here's the deal. I can give you my trade secret, but you will still not ever be able to do it the way I do it.
That's right.
Because you are you.
That's right.
And I am me. So it frees you up to share when you have, well, maybe just when you're confident in that you are you, the other person is the other person, and it will never be the same, right? Like we all drive a car.
Yes, but not exactly the same way.
Right.
Thank God.
Exactly. So I mean, that's the thing, is that everybody can have the same exact tool, but everybody's going to use that tool in a different way.
And that's the magic of all of this. I don't care whether you're talking art or how to lay rock down in a bed. I mean, it's you learn something, and then you can use that as a tool and share that with somebody else. Yeah. And whether it has anything to do with planting or whatever it is, you assimilate the information as it was given to you. You assimilate it, you take it in, it goes around, and then you use it your way, and then that becomes a way that you can teach or that you can share with somebody else. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't mean you don't get frustrated. It doesn't mean that it works every time. It doesn't mean these techniques that I've learned about art and how to apply my chalk, for instance, my pastels, doesn't mean it's going to work every time. I could show you a piece in my studio, and I may in a minute, that was the biggest struggle I think I've ever done. And I still don't think I like this piece, but I was determined to finish it. And fortunately, I've never thrown anything away. I felt like it, but I've never just tossed it, because later you'll look at that thing and say, wow, that's not so bad.
Right. Or you look at it and you remember the things you learned from it.
Yes.
Right?
And don't do that again.
And don't do that again. And oh yeah, that's right. And those are valuable lessons all in themselves. So
That's true. That's true. And then when you see the person you taught teach that to the next generation, now that does give me cold chills.
Like that's the goal of education or teaching, is so that, number one, you're passing on a legacy, but the goal is that the person I'm teaching is going to surpass me.
Yes.
Is going to be better.
Yes, and they're going to be better at it.
Right. Maybe they got the tools earlier.
You just planted the seed.
Yeah,
That's all.
And I just want to know that they're going to be better than me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
then what a thrill when you see that materialize.
Yes.
When you actually see that right in front of you, it's just, it's almost heart-wrenching because it's so special.
It is super special. Yeah. And that's, Yeah, that's the goal. And then I think that we all have that as a job to do. Why we're here. Our purpose is to
I
create a
think so.
legacy and pass on the information or the things that we have, the tools we've been given. Pass them on.
I think we all have a purpose for being here, and I think mine has to do with imparting the information that I've taken in from someone else. I wanted to teach from the time I was in like 5th grade because I was in love with my 5th grade teacher. She was incredible. And so I wanted to do that. But my sense of curiosity, which we've already discussed, is pretty high level. And so you combine the need to want to teach and to travel all those distances to get your degree and do all of those things. I was young and it was important. And so I pursued that. And I've never been sorry. I've not been back in the public class setting, but I've been basically teaching forever.
Yeah. Well, we should all have that perspective of we are always teaching, right? We're either teaching what you can do or what you shouldn't do.
Or you're learning.
Yeah,
or
for
you're
sure.
learning.
For sure. Hopefully in the process, like it's happening simultaneously, right? The learning.
Absolutely.
And the
And that never ends. It
No.
never ends. If you open yourself up to that,
I agree.
there's something new out there always
Always.
to try to assimilate into what you do in your daily life.
Agreed. Yes. And that makes it exciting, though, right?
Yes,
I
it
see you
is.
getting excited.
Yes,
I'm
it
like, "Ooh,
is.
That's exciting."
Yes, it is.
Yeah, when you can look at it and go, what am I going to learn today? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I love that too. All right.
Okay.
Yes.
So-
what a beautiful conversation.
Oh, thank you.
You're a lovely
It's
person.
my pleasure to have you do.
Thank
Thank
you
you so much.
Bobbye.
Thank
This
you
was
so
a
much.
pure pleasure for me. Thank
Indeed,
you.
it was a shared pleasure.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I'm glad.
I enjoyed this more than you know.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
I'm
I
glad.
needed this. I
Oh,
needed this.
good.
I need a little recognition in my life right now. So that's nice.